Thank you very much and good morning, everybody. My name is Simon and I'm from Northwest University. I'm head of Department Agriculture, Economics and Extension there. And I'm really thrilled and saying thank you very much for the invite to make this presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, I came across this concept of value chain when I was still a student doing MBA some years back. And we were grappling with it. We were asked to, to draw up models in value chain and so on. And even up to today, there is no clear-cut, model of value chain, except the the guideline that was provided by one professor at Harvard University in 1985, I think, and Professor Porter came up with a very beautiful model that seemed to be suiting, different countries and different communities. And my presentation actually, it's based on that model. When I looked at the model, it gives a clear conceptual framework on how to tackle value chain of any product in agriculture anyway. But our emphasis today, we're talking about the biologicals, and I'm happy that the previous presenter explained exactly what are the plant biologicals. So I'm just going to link the value chain story to what you have already heard. Now, my presentation, as I'm saying, is just giving a conceptual framework on how to approach value chain, specifically of these biologicals that we're talking about today. And the emphasis is just on two levels in the value chain. Remember, when we talk about the value chain, we're talking about all the activities that are happening across from production until the recipient or the customer receive a complete product. Now, my emphasis on the conceptual framework, which is based on Prof. Porter's work, is talking about the activities in value chain. It's important that we should understand that there are two major activities that are happening in value chain, specifically of the biologicals that we're talking about today. And according to Professor Porter, there are two sets of activities in a value chain. The first set is the primary activities, and the second set is the secondary activities. Obviously, by the wording itself, it implies that the primary activities are base activities. They are the actual measure activities, whereas the secondary activities are supporting and anchoring the primary activities. And that's my presentation today. It's just much more emphasizing on the activities. Because it's good that we open up to this and discuss so that the further activities that he has mentioned, that is going to be the SWOT analysis formulation later on, it has to be based on a common understanding of what is this value chain all about. Now, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, this is a fairly new concept. It was coined ultimately by Professor Michael Porter. As I said, he's coming from Harvard University. It's one of the outstanding universities in the world. And this value chain, according to his explanation, is just about the business activities. In other words, whatever is happening from the production up to the ultimate hands of the consumer. Now, it's not only about the product itself, but also the services that are around the production of the product. So the value chain doesn't only talk about the product itself, or only, it also talks about things that surrounds in the periphery of the production and the supply of the product. Now, like I said, it's talking about the inception as the formulation of the product or the generation of the product until it reaches where it's supposed to be. And the point I want to emphasize is that fourth bullet there on the slide, which is talking about the understanding of the cost effectiveness or cost efficiency. In other words, the reason why we look at the value chain, we are trying to assess what is the cost efficiency of every step or every activity. And I'm sure upon that analysis, explanations will definitely be reached with reference to why does it seem like the biologicals are not well perceived. Most probably, one area in the value chain is not in place. But I'm not going to get into details. My duty is just to explain the conceptual framework of the value chain. Now, here we are. This is what Professor suggested as a guideline. And like I'm saying, we cannot move too far from this because it exactly captures what needs to be done in reviewing and analyzing value chain. Like I said before, two major groups of activities, according to Professor, the primary activities and secondary. This is his model. This is how he has put his conceptual framework for quick understanding. But I want us to go into details. Now, the primary activities, the key primary activities are actually 5. There are 5. And the first one, he calls them inbound operations. These are primary and where everything starts. In other words, where the process actually starts. Like I'm saying here, he's talking about the supply chain source of inputs. In other words, if we have to produce the biologicals, the plant biologicals, there are certain prescriptions and proscriptions, and I'm talking about the inputs, and somebody, our previous speaker was also talking about the fertilizers and so on. There are prescriptions that needs to be followed. Now, that is one area that needs to be looked at, that what happens with the inbound operations. In other words, where do we get these inputs and what inputs are there in place? It's not only the fertilizers, it's not only the soil, but the seed and how the seeds are produced and so on as the basis for the starting of the value chain. Now, the second activity which is critical, emphasized by Professor, is the operation sphere. In how its production is done, but what is it that happens after production? And that's why he's talking about activities that are focusing on process in terms of transformation of from inputs. In other words, the combination of the fertilizer, irrigation, the seeds, and so on and so on. Ultimately, the output is there, but how does it realize? How does it come into place? So, this second sphere, it's extremely important because my experience reading through, and I was in Uganda some few weeks ago, and I looked at the value chains. I realized that the operation seems to be overlooked in many instances, and that breaks the chain itself. So one has to understand how does it happen when the inputs are transformed to output. In other words, the combination of whatever we shall put there towards production of our biological. Now, the third sphere is talking about the outbound logistics. This is very critical. And I think one question touched on this. Well, it was referring to perception, but perception becomes dim when you can't access what you want. You lose hope that I cannot access it anyway. So let me just leave it. And that's a critical sphere and component of this value chain. The output, the outbound logistic. That how accessible are these biologicals? If we preach them and we tell people that these biologicals are good because they are natural and yet sustainable, but the question is how accessible are they? So this entails the question of how are they delivered to the customer, so the final recipient. It's an aspect of the value chain. If it's neglected, then by implication it means the product cannot reach the intended destination as such. And the movement of the product to the recipient entails quite a number of things. As he stated, the professor is talking about the storage. Is it easy to collect? And can it be readily distributed to the recipients? This I'm talking about the farmers. Now, the other sphere, which is critical, also is talking about the marketing and sales. Are we projecting and telling people the right things about the biologicals? This is very important because the perceptions are changed when people are told the exact happening by authorities. In other words, my perception will change if an authority tells me sort of a different or a confirmed and credible story about the biological. So I will not hesitate to get the biological if it's well presented to me through the advertisements and maybe the branding also. So here, talking about the visibility, is it visible? I mean, I'll always refer to the previous question that, for example, the traditional medicines and so on, but these things, are they visible? Are they readily there? Do we know about them? That's where the question comes. So marketing and sales, it's another component of the value chain. And the last part of primary activities is talking about the service, is that here you are, the product has been delivered, but what are the follow-ups? What are the subsequent moves to sustain the use of that product? And we are talking about the advices, the services that are rendered to the farmers in terms of sustaining the supply and also the understanding, further understanding of this biological. So farmers need support, we know that. And in my country, the support is presented or supposed to be given by extension officers. But the question is, are they properly equipped to drive that? And that's why in the value chain, we have to reflect on that, because that might be the weak point of the chain. That, people are given stuff and the giver just walks away, and when problems comes, there's nobody to advise and give further knowledge about that product. So we need to look at that, and I'm sure in the SWOT analysis compilation that will definitely be taken care of. We are having a serious problem in this country concerning the support of farmers. Extension officers are properly trained. However, when they get to the job, their profession is sort of sidelined. They start doing things that are not necessarily in their domain. They run political issues and so on. I've been there, I know what I'm talking about. So that could be a problem that we might need to reflect on. So we have now talked about the primary activities. The secondary activities are just two. As I said, these secondary activities are just there to enhance the primary activities. Primary activities are the core activities that needs to happen. Now, the secondary activity number one, which is critical, is that who is positioned, for example, to sell or to make these biologicals available? And that's why here we're talking about the vendors or the sellers. Who are these people and where are they? Obviously, it goes without saying that at what price are they selling this? Because that could be discouraging customers to buy if the prices are too high. How negotiable are the prices? And I'm sure in a SWOT analysis formulation, we'll also be looking at that the vendors, are they flexible? Is that a weakness or a strength in terms of professing and preaching about these biologicals further? So that's very critical, because these things don't come for free and they don't come cheap. But the question is the supply and demand. Where does it meet to produce the price? And can the price be influenced? That's what we need to find out in the value chain. Now, the last sphere of the secondary activity in the value chain, in my opinion, coming from academic world, I see it as the most, possibly the most important, arena or area. It's talking about research and development. Nothing stays static. We have to move on with the times. Now, the question that arises is that how much research and innovation is carried out with the biologicals, with the plant biologicals. So that chain is critical, because if it's weak, if we don't have researches and innovations coming up to support the whole primary set of activities, then we are going nowhere. Sooner or later, we'll go absolute. We'll be irrelevant, because life really changes with time. The kind of pests, as explained, the meaning of the biological, the kind of pests also evolved. They change shape. I mean, we have seen it with COVID. In a short time period, it has changed to many forms. And that's why research and innovation became critical. And thanks to it, because had it not been research and innovation, possibly we would all have died from COVID. Now, ladies and gentlemen, those are the spheres. I think that's good enough for today's presentation. Like I said, the title of the presentation was Introduction to. And I'm aware that I'm not in class, I'm not teaching my students. I could have gone into further details anyway. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. Simon, and we're all students. So we're very happy to listen and learn more. And we have now starting up for the group discussions, which Lerato will present and take you through a bit more. Also a handout with some of your slides here, so don't feel desperate. If there's a lot of information, you will be able to go back to the handout as well in the group discussions. But before we go there, are there any questions? Or comments? Yes.
Thank you, Prof. That was an enlightening presentation. My name is Thabo Maseka. I'm a farmer in Lichtenburg in the Northwest. I'm just wondering, both your primary and secondary activities, where are we going to fit the benefits, environmental benefits that come with both activities for plant biologicals? Is there, or has there ever been extensive research made with the final products that are treated with biologicals and or the environmental benefits that come with it?
Yeah, if I may just respond to that, is that my understanding is that we are aware of the pros and cons. So, in other words, advantages and disadvantages of using the plant biologicals. It has both. And one major advantage that the farmers are going to get is that the use of biologicals, I'm talking about the plant biologicals, they are natural, they are compatible to the environment, they are okay to sustain us even for tomorrow. In my opinion, farmers' contribution or benefit that the farmer will get is that when they are properly exposed to the biologicals, they will then start using less of the synthetic and the manufactured chemicals that are at times extremely dangerous when they are injudiciously used. You have seen the Hartebeespoort dam and elsewhere. There are traces of what is CAN in limestone ammonium nitrate, because farmers are using it wrongly somewhere, it penetrates through the soil until it reaches the drinking water. So what I'm saying is that with the use of this and understanding the value chain, farmers will definitely benefit by using this natural stuff so that we can save our environment. Now, the other critical role that should be played by farmers in this value chain is that last sphere that I mentioned of research and innovation. You see, a lot of research that we are doing at universities and elsewhere is just good enough for the shelves. You know, students do research just to get the degree and that's it. And that's not the right way of doing it. Research must be informed by the needs of the farmers. In other words, it should start there. So what I'm saying is that if you look at that last sphere, if it's well anchored and it's well taken care of, it implies that the research will be geared towards solving the farmers' problems. The problems that the farmers are encountering every day will be sorted out. So in a nutshell, I think that's my response to your question, that the benefit of farmers is that they will use sustainable products which are environmentally healthy. And number two, it's a fact that the biologicals are cheaper compared to chemicals. And lastly, farmers' problems will be sorted out immediately by research if that last sphere of value chain is properly addressed. I hope I've answered your question.
Any more questions? Yeah. Michael, we need the mic.
Yeah, my question is, you know, this value chain concept, as good as it is in helping us understand processes, sometimes it also gets us into some kind of confusion, because you have given us a very good layers and spheres of the value chain components, and so often you have different role players in the various value chains. Then you probably start operational decisions and planning based on established value chain. But so often what happens in real life is that out of greed or personal interests and etc., sometimes people to just tend to either engulf a few components of the value chain into a single component, or just have another side-stepping aspect. You know, the reason why I'm saying this is that, for example, I closely studied the Devil's Claw value chain, starting from where the farmers collect material from the Khanyesa area all the way until it reaches France and Germany and comes back to Diskemen, etc. And then what happens to that? And what you see is that every time there is a regulation, the value chain, if you were to reconfigure and draw it on a piece of paper, it changes. Yeah. So what should be our fundamental take-home in terms of understanding a value chain? Do we really take it at face value, or do we try and understand the nitty-gritty all the time if we were to be operational in the value chain space? Because that is the dilemma and the question that I have.
I think my answer to that is that you said it very clearly and nicely, is that as we discussed, that it has spheres and activities which are carried out by role players, by certain people. And these people specialize in their spheres. But it's very helpful that we understand, even if I'm not in the marketing sphere, as an example, maybe I'm just a farmer who's producing, I have to understand how my product is marketed. So I think you got it right, that it's empirical and extremely important that all of us, no matter where we are in the value chain, we have to understand the whole value chain, so that we should be clear of what happens to my product ultimately, and how did it reach this price, and what are the consequences of my producing this product to the ultimate end. So my answer to you directly is that, and I'm sure is the purpose of this workshop, to try and get this value chain story understood by everybody, so that wherever you are placed, then you should know the context, why you are there, and what is it that you're doing. You cannot have one person who's producing, marketing, researching, and on doing all the spheres of the chain. It's just impossible. Just emphasizing that it is really important that we all understand, even if I'm not in the marketing, even if I'm not in the research, but I should have an idea of what's happening in there. It's like driving a car. You are not expected to be a mechanic, but you have to have a basic understanding of what is happening in the car. That will help. The more you know, the better, even if you are not a mechanic. I hope I've responded to your question.
Sorry, I just saw a note there that the speakers must identify themselves, so I must.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I think I'm the one who asked the question about the question that was just answered. Is Michael Bairu from the Agricultural Research Council. Thank you. There's a request from the people online that we must identify ourselves.
Yeah, that's good. So they kind of always see you, so it's very good.
My name is Johan van der Waals. I work with Real IPM at this stage. I spent a long time at the University of Pretoria lecturing on land use planning and soil science, and I've run my own consulting company for 13 years. I didn't want to give a CV. I just want to give the background as to what I'm going to say now. And that is, I want to tie in with this value chain discussion. The one thing we lose as and I'm going to talk about farmers on the one hand, and I'm going to talk about people in the, let's call it the regulatory research type environment on the other hand. And the one thing we lose sight of is that every farmer is, unfortunately, required to be a specialist in pests, in soil, in the accessing of credit, accessing of money, finding out where to find what, who to sell what. The farmers are price takers, unfortunately, in many of these cases, which means that they are exposed to, we know that in the entire value chain, the farmers end up with the least out of the pie, okay, which is part of the problem. And one of the problems is that we can't just have farmers that are advised by the Department of Agriculture to do things in a certain way. Each farmer must be empowered, but they must empower themselves with knowledge. And that's why farming is not for the faint-hearted. Farming is for the brave. And farming is for the people who know that they've got to learn all the time. So our role, and I'm now talking from myself as having lectured and sitting within a company and so on. Our role is a huge component in this value chain is, number one, we sit either from a commercial side where we have to make money, the company has to make money and to provide a way of providing the products, for instance. Or you've got the extension officers that have to provide a certain support. But I think the main emphasis should be on equipping the farmers and getting the farmers to develop those skills and to become active role players in their own value chain. Okay, because they can't just remain passive workers of the soil. They have to become. Okay, so that's just one concept I wanted to mention there, and I think it's critical that we focus on that. The second thing is, Professor, you said that biologicals are cheaper than chemicals. I work in that field. It's not true. Okay, but I'll explain now. I'm not taking you on. Okay. I'll explain now. Biologicals require a lot more critical thinking and assessment and management and scouting and a whole bunch of other things. Those skills that the farmers have to learn. A bit more difficult with biologicals, which is why there is a poor uptake and why there is a perception that biologicals don't work. Because biologicals used outside of their niche make nothing. and they often cost a lot of money. So the perception with a lot of farmers, a lot of the commercial farmers we work with, is that biologicals are a lot more expensive. So part of what our whole program is, and I'll explain later on what Real IPM does and how we cross this bridge, is to equip those farmers, and we spend time. So we run an expensive model. We run field visits on a weekly basis with our clients. You don't just drop product off and next year you say to the farmer, oh, I think this is what you're going to need. So we work through our products, we work with product support all the time. And that's why it's critical then to have input from the farmers and have that engagement with the farmers. It's an expensive model, it's a difficult model, but it's a model that can work if there are bigger role players buying into the same type of idea. So that's just a thought I wanted to leave there. Thank you.